Our opening thought comes from a person who I guess was just born down the road, Dwight D. Eisenhower, his Chants for Peace speech. He wrote, "Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone, it is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children." Our next reading comes from the book Half the Sky by Nicholas Kristof and Cheryl Wu Dunn. They write, "One of the greatest failings of the American education system, in our view, is that young people can graduate from university without any understanding of poverty at home or abroad." Before I read our next reading, I just want to mention that Matthew Desmond, who wrote Poverty by America, and that's the next reading, is coming to Oklahoma City University on September 12th at 7 p.m. in Kirkpatrick Auditorium. It's free and open to the public, so if you want to take a good midweek excursion to Oklahoma City to see an excellent speaker, I hope that you'll join us once again, September the 12th. And then following his appearance at OCU, we're going to have a 5-week free book discussion group looking at Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. And that will be held on Fridays from noon to 1:30, and that's also free. I'll be leading that on Zoom. So if you're interested in joining us, some of you have joined these book discussion groups in the past. We'd love to have you be a part of that as well. So the second reading comes from Matthew Desmond, Poverty by America. He writes, "Let's call it the scarcity diversion. Here's the playbook. First, allow elites to hoard a resource like money or land. Second, pretend that arrangement is natural, unavoidable, or better yet, ignore it altogether. Third, attempt to address social problems caused by the resource hoarding only with the scarce resources left over. So instead of making the rich pay all their taxes, for instance, design a welfare state around the paltry budget you are left with when they don't. Fourth, fail. Fail to drive down the poverty rate. Fail to build more affordable housing. Fifth, claim this is the best we can do. Preface your comments by saying, in a world of scarce resources, blame government programs, blame capitalism, blame the other political party, blame immigrants, blame anyone you can except those who most deserve it. Gaslighting is not too strong a phrase to describe such pretense." We live in the wealthiest nation on earth, yet we have the highest poverty rate among advanced democracies, although there could be some debate about how advanced we are as a democracy right now. What is behind the perpetuation of American poverty? What's behind the perpetuation of American poverty, and what can be done about it? As Matthew Desmond asks in his book, Poverty by America, why is there so much hardship in this land of abundance? Martin Luther King Jr. once described poverty as one of the triple evils plaguing humankind along with racism and militarism. In addressing the challenge of poverty, King noted, quote, "There is nothing new about poverty. What is new, however, is that we have the resources to get rid of it." As many others who have studied poverty in America closely, King recognized that most efforts to address poverty have been piecemeal. They have lacked the comprehensive approach that is necessary to bring about significant systemic change to end poverty. In 1967, in his work, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, King wrote, "At no time has a total, coordinated, and fully adequate program been conceived. As a consequence, fragmentary and spasmodic reforms have failed to reach down to the profoundest needs of the poor." King continues, "In addition to the absence of coordination and sufficiency, the programs of the past all have another common failing. They are indirect. Each seeks to solve poverty by first solving something else. I am now convinced that the simplest approach will prove to be the most effective. The solution to poverty," King writes, "is to abolish it directly by a now widely discussed measure, the guaranteed income." King claimed that our inability to eradicate poverty is not a problem of resources, but rather it is a problem of the will. It represents a moral and spiritual deficiency in our society. The existence of poverty, he is arguing, is a moral problem. The existence of poverty is immoral. Now, many wealthy and powerful persons would have us believe that poverty is a moral problem, but it's a moral problem of the poor. It is the fault of the poor. It is somehow a moral failure of the poor that they continue to be poor. But the actual evidence suggests that the moral blame for perpetuating poverty in our society is a moral failure not of the poor, but rather it is a moral failure of the rich. It is a moral failure of the powerful who have created systems to maintain their wealth, to maintain their power at the expense of the poor, at the expense of the most vulnerable among us. The culture wars that they perpetuate are simply a diversionary tactic, a smokescreen that keeps the real sources of our problems hidden from view. And lately, we have seen that when the wealthy and powerful have difficulty controlling democratic political processes for the sake of protecting their economic interests, they seem more than willing to weaken democracy itself and embrace increasingly autocratic means to pursue their ends. The economist Joseph Stiglitz has noticed this tendency, and he notes this increase in the ideological embrace of autocracy and argues that, quote, "resolving economic and political inequality is vital if we want people to reject authoritarianism." Stiglitz writes, "Economic and political inequality have grown so extreme that many are rejecting democracy. This is fertile ground for authoritarianism, especially for the kind of right-wing populism that we see so many politicians currently representing." He goes on to write, "But such leaders have shown that they have none of the answers that discontented voters are actually seeking. On the contrary, the policies they enact when given power only make matters worse." The reason their policies make matters worse is that they are blaming our social, economic, and political problems on everything but the actual core source of the problems. The wealthy and powerful point the finger of blame at government, immigrants, entitlements, regulations, and even the poor themselves as a way of distracting us from seeing where the most blame lies for the perpetuation of human deprivation in the wealthiest country on earth. And the most blame lies in the greed of the wealthy themselves and the systems they have created to maintain, protect, and expand their power. The wealthy and powerful want to blame teachers for our public education problems, while completely ignoring the impact of poverty, economic injustices, and food insecurity experienced by students. And the wealthy are silent about the inequities caused by the use of property taxes as the key source of public education funding. The wealthy and powerful in my city, where I live, Oklahoma City, want us to pay $225 million for a new basketball arena using a regressive sales tax. And these are the same people who tell us we have an entitlements program problem in the United States. The same wealthy and powerful persons who are very willing to cut Social Security are fighting tooth and nail to preserve government subsidies for fossil fuel companies, industrial agriculture, and other large corporate interests. A country with the wealth of the United States should have no problem with funding Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We don't have an entitlements problem. We have a greed problem. All the while, we are told that raising the minimum wage would damage the economy, even though CEOs make hundreds of times more money than typical workers make. If we created and enforced a law that CEOs, chief executive officers in the United States, can make no more than just 100 times as much as their lowest paid workers. That sounds like a lot, right? But right now they make somewhere between 400 and 600 times as much as the lowest paid workers. But so if we had a law and enforced it that they can make no more than 100 times as much as their lowest paid workers, I'm guessing we would see an increase in the minimum wage pretty quickly. The wealthy and powerful persons who say that we cannot raise the minimum wage are the same persons who are perfectly fine with CEO salaries increasing at an inflation-adjusted rate. This is adjusted for inflation. It's increased 1,460% since 1978. You don't want to see how much the minimum wage has not increased since 1978 when inflation adjusted. It's actually gone down when adjusted for inflation. To preserve their wealth and their power, the wealthy and powerful are willing to break our democracy. They are willing to break our democracy, and then they blame our broken democracy for all of our problems, conveniently ignoring that they are the ones who have broken our democracy, that they are the ones most responsible for and complicit in the rise of autocracy that comes when democracies are overtaken and co-opted by oligarchs. The only way America can end poverty is to end the continuing hostile takeover of our democracy by the wealthy and powerful. Once we do that, the solutions for addressing poverty are not as difficult as they seem. Other societies are doing a pretty good job at this, much better job than we are here in the United States. Housing first to solve homelessness. It's much less expensive to solve the problem of homelessness with housing first, providing shelter first. In fact, it's $10,000 a year less expensive to address homelessness with housing first than it is to not have housing first. Universal health care for all persons. We seem to be one of the few countries in the world not to be able to do that. equal opportunities for education for all persons, a guaranteed minimum income, environmental justice for all, so that it doesn't matter if you're a person of color or a person with low economic means, you're still going to have clean air, clean water, and an area of land that is not polluted. Full participation of all persons in a vibrant democracy. All of these things, these provide us with the answers to end poverty. These are the things that are working in other societies. But to do those things, we first have to stop looking in the directions where the fingers of the wealthy and powerful are pointing, and see that it is the greed of the wealthy and powerful that is at the root of the problems that we are experiencing. While building and maintaining an economic system that concentrates wealth in the hands of the few, the wealthy perpetuate the myth that security can only come from accumulating individual wealth, rather than coming from the creation of just and beloved community. Until we recognize the true source of both our security and our flourishing, we will have an extremely difficult time ending poverty. We will have an extremely difficult time addressing the other evils of human deprivation and ecological degradation. That greed perpetuates. Our parting thought comes from Muhammad Yunus, from his writing, Creating a World Without Poverty, Social Business and the Future of Capitalism. Yunus writes, once poverty is gone, we'll need to build museums to display its horrors to future generations. They'll wonder why poverty continued so long in human society, how a few people could live in luxury while billions dwelt in misery, deprivation, and despair.